Women rated women highest on all 10 attributes and characteristics. Men, however, did not rank men highest on all 10 leadership attributes and characteristics. Let me just repeat that again. That's interesting for an academic. Women ranked women highest on all leadership characteristics and attributes, but men did not rank men highest on all leadership attributes and characteristics. So then when you say, well, what's different? I said, well, maybe we're looking, instead of male, female, maybe what we should be looking at are generation. Could we find out what men might have different viewpoints than other men? And sure enough, that's what we found. Generation X and Y, and I think people know who you are, boomers X and Y, were gender agnostic. That meant they didn't really see any differences in how men or women led, which brings you to the conclusion that the possible segment that was scoring differences between men and women were boomer men, which makes sense, right? Very different generations, right? We all have different kinds of environments we grow up with. Then I said, well, how big is that population and should I care, right? So I started to map it out and said, well, if I look at the workforce, which is 50% women, and I look at how much Generation X there is, how much Generation Y there are, and then I pull out the women and put them with the 50%, and then I separate out the men in each generation, I'm left with about 18%. So 18% of the male population in the workforce is perceiving some differences between men and women. Now, I don't like to go into stereotypes at all, because that's really easy to jump to conclusion. And I haven't even told you yet what the differences are, right? But we found a population. So before I go into the stereotypes, let's just do a sanity check here. Do all boomer men really perceive gender differences? We don't know, right? Probably not. Do all younger people, are they gender agnostic? Probably not. We know a lot of this is based on where your environment, where you're born, what kind of roles, what kind of companies you work in. So I like the show Sex and the City. Do people know Sex and the City? Okay, so I like to take little snippets to illustrate a point. So let me just bring you to a little scene where Carrie Bradshaw, the author, Generation X, is sitting and dining with Samantha Jones. We have no idea what generation Samantha Jones is from, but let's just say she's a boomer woman, or on the cusp there with Generation X and the boomer women. Carrie is dating a Generation X guy named Jack Berger at this point in her life. They're both peers. They both publish books. And Carrie has a big win. Her book goes big. She gets royalties, and she's going to France, right? She's just signed a big royalty agreement with France. Jack Berger's book, unfortunately, was on the down. It's his third book. He wasn't doing so well. And everything was fine until the balance of power shifted between Carrie and Jack, right? All of a sudden, he was uncomfortable with the shift. Meanwhile, you have Samantha Jones, our nice boomer lady who runs her own PR firm, dating a very young Generation Y guy who's a starving actor named Jared. And she feels bad for him, is going to make him into a shining actor, and he loves it. He even lets her change his name to Smith Jared. So I wanted to find out, what are these differences? What are the differences that this segment of men saw between the genders in leadership? Well, they scored that women higher on communication, mentoring, coaching, empathy, collaboration, and inclusiveness. Scored men higher on making decisions quickly, vision, taking risks, and strategy. Women outscored men in this population on people skills, and the men ranked themselves higher on competence and risk-taking. So you say, well, how does that play out in the workplace? Well, we know the quintessential baby boomer hierarchical male VP manager is Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock. Do people know 30 Rock? No? Okay. Jack models himself. He is the boomer man, gray hair, models himself after Jack Welch. Hierarchical firm, traditional roles. So here is an example of, is this the quick decisiveness that modern companies really will want anymore? Or is this an example of a traditional hierarchical type of decisiveness? So that doesn't really fly so much, particularly where I live in Silicon Valley, that kind of. So is that the kind of decisiveness? Is that we want in leadership? Well, I talk to women. Now, when you see these bubbles come up, that means I'm in my interviews now with these 200 women, and I ask them, what about these findings? What do you think? The women said to me, you know what, people today in 21st century business is about people. So leadership skills, you really need to have those skills of collaboration and inclusiveness, all of the things that women shine on. But at the same time, you also need to be able to take risks. So many of the women, both entrepreneurs, COOs, and CEOs said, you know, something that set me apart from men and women in my company or in my business was the fact that I was willing to take a risk. And that is an important learning, and I think that we can learn from the gender data that we had. Collaboration and people skills are imperative, but so is risk-taking. So let's take a look at, do people know Nurse Jackie? Everybody here knows Nurse Jackie. This is the only one that usually I have to explain. So Nurse Jackie is in a Queens ER room. This is a really good example of situational risk. You might remember that the head of the hospital had a pulmonary attack. They take him off the floor. The ER is in absolute chaos. Even the doctors who you see in the white coats are not standing up and taking charge. Rather, you're going to see in the situation the subject matter expert who understands the operations and the process in the ER is the person, not necessarily the highest ranked, is the person who takes charge. Taking care of the customer is primary, but at the same time, you see the risk-taking of how do I make sure that people are taken care of. Now, I'm not going to encourage you, this is your firm here to tell you what to do, but I think it's a great illustration of both of the characteristics of leadership coming into play. So I say to the women who I'm interviewing, tell me how this plays out in the workplace. What is calculated risk? What should people be doing today different than in the past? And they said to me, Tracey, the big difference today is you cannot wait around to get tapped on the shoulder. There's people sitting in companies thinking because they've been in a company for a long time, they've been in a role for a long time, that it's their turn. And they said that isn't how modern leadership is today. Companies are much more competitive, much more under global pressures. We need people who raise their hand. We need people today who find extensions of our business, whether it be a cost saving or a profit opportunity or taking care of a customer in a different way. That's what CEOs are looking for. That's what chief operating officers are looking for. Status quo is not suitable anymore. Good lessons. So let's just talk about that other characteristics, confidence. Well, I took a little dive into the generations. Well, there's our boomer men, felt that they're more confident than boomer women. Generation Y women, feeling that they're more confident than Generation Y men. And Generation Y women feeling that they are more confident than Generation boomers and Y and X women. So our youngest generation is the most confident generation coming into the workforce. Second, when do people think that they will become leaders? Generation X and boomers say 40s. That's about the time where you become leaders. What did Generation Y, our millennials, say? 20s. 20s, I should be, right? Probably have a few in the room. I should be a director by my 20s. I should be a vice president by my 20s. Very different kind of philosophy coming into the workforce, right? And you know what we're feeling, right? Generation X is sitting around saying, I've been here following the rules. Baby boomers aren't retiring. I'm not moving up. Got millennials coming in on the pipeline saying, wait a minute, I want to be a VP, right? So you got a lot of different dynamics going in the workforce. So I asked a Gen Y in one of our interviews who was a vice president, tell me what's going on with your generation. What's going on with your thinking? And she said to me, you know what? When my parents graduated from college, they had a job. Whether the college got them the job, the neighbor got them the job, or the job was available. And then they just stayed there. They stayed there for the longevity. She said, I graduated from college. I had no job. I graduated a survivor. So I approach my career like a survivor. And she said, I go out and I look at firms. I look at the board of directors. What are their ages? What is the gender? What is their background? Right? And then I talk to people on LinkedIn and Facebook and say, what is it like to work in that firm? And she said, I don't worry about moving. I'll move states. I'll move across county lines. I'll move from different firms. Because here's what I learned. Not all companies are kind to women. They don't value them. Not all companies are kind to younger generations. But if I'm going to control my career, which she wanted to be a vice president by 29, I have to make some choices, and I have to interview firms as aggressively as they interview me. And I need to go out and get the skills and experience, right, to get to where I want to go. Very different philosophy coming in. And we do see that in the numbers, the turnover, very different with the younger generation than with the previous generations. Okay, negotiating and problem solving. Very interesting. We had conflicting results. On the quantitative study, men respondents scored as more proficient and as experts in negotiating over women. When I did the qualitative study and interviewed women, 200 plus women, they said, you know what, women are more proficient in complex business negotiations. And many said, in fact, if you have a global negotiation or complex negotiation, you absolutely want to make sure you have a woman at the table. Very interesting differences. I said, why would I have two different differences? And women said to me, it's the word, negotiating. It has a connotation. It's really now today about problem solving. No. Today in business, it's really problem solving. It's complex negotiating. In fact, you need to have a lot of different skills today when you're negotiating. In the high-tech world, in your world, you have global, you have complexities, you have a lot of money at stake. It isn't about win-lose anymore. It is about win-win. And women bring a very unique characteristics to the table. They bring the listening skills, the preparation skills, the looking at all stakeholders, wanting to make sure that there's a mutual gain felt by all parties. But, women said, women do not like to negotiate for themselves. Came up over and over and over again. They don't like to ask for promotions, and they don't like to negotiate for salary. So there is a difference that came up. A couple of tips and pointers, by the way, from our women on negotiating salaries. Today, what you need to do, it's not under the table, it's not even the charts anymore. It's knowing what you're worth. And there are ways to know what you're worth. There's many websites out there, of course, where you can look up down to the zip code, salary and titles, Glassdoor, salary.com. There's also many salary surveys by different companies, staffing companies. At the same time, you need to keep metrics on yourself, quantitative metrics of your success, because let's face it, nobody else is keeping them for you. You bring in the data and you can have a conversation. The point of this, in the business context, is that we have shifted away from the win-lose type of negotiating into win-win. And the gender and generations both play well into this area of negotiation. So we also looked at industry-specific skills. Healthcare, information technology, services, telecommunications, and manufacturing. Across the board, the number one and number two top leadership skill, both genders and all generations picked, was communication skills and managing complex projects. Communication meaning internal communication, written communication, the way that you speak, the way that you present, and complex projects just because the world has gotten so much more complex. Number one and number two across the board. Other skills that are important is organizing people, industry experience, negotiation, strategy, and technical proficiency. So the question comes up is, well, how do I get these skills? I went back out to these women and say, what do you suggest for people who are working in a company who say, you know, how do I get these leadership skills? How can I build up a portfolio if I'm in my job? They said, number one, take classes, inside and outside. There's a whole portfolio of classes that your company probably offers that you don't even know about. Take a look at it. If you need negotiating skills, if you need financial skills or technology. 2, join cross-functional teams. It's a great way to cross-train and learn about other functional areas. 3, make lateral moves. A lot of us think the ladder is up, but the ladder today is really a lattice and lateral. Number 4, volunteer for skill-building projects. Your company is rolling out enterprise resource planning or very large initiatives. It's a great way to learn about technology and have technology learn about your skill or functional area. And number 5, join organizations. I'm interviewing now a lot of recruiters on career, and they say they really look for what organizations you lead outside and inside of work. What are you doing with your spare time, and what kind of roles you take on? Excellent advice. In the future, every person will have a women's career. Very interesting statement that women said to us in this study. And I said, well, what does that mean? And then I looked at the data from our future of work and future skills study. Longevity, extreme longevity. You are living to 100. I already see people just looking at me like, no, yeah, you're living to 100. In fact, I bet you see that billboard that I saw on the New Jersey Turnpike. You're born today, you're going to live to 120. By 2020, the number of people living to 100 will double. This is all the Prudential doing a great job of reminding us that you're not going to die by 50, right? So I asked women on the qualitative side, what does it mean to you that you're going to live to 100? And they quickly said, if I'm going to live to 100, I have to afford to live to 100, which means I have to work till I'm 80. Till I'm 80 or 70. I have to work 50 years. In Silicon Valley time, we outlive companies, right? So it's a very different philosophy. I have to stay healthy to work for 50 or 60 years. I have to stay educated enough to work for 50 or 60 years. I need to remain technical enough, because let's face it, the iPhone only came out less than 10 years ago. So the technology is really moving. Very interesting. So what will careers look like? Well, women say the careers are going to look like what's happening today is a lot like our lives. We come out of college, we go into business. We have kids, we might scale back. Then we might go back into the workforce and start a business or do something different. Then we get involved with elder care. It's really a lattice today, and it's something to think about because it won't be that straight up line anymore. Careers would be more enabled by how women's philosophy of life has challenged them to take on different roles and different opportunities. Mentors, are they important? You know, in our interviews, yes. In fact, in both studies, mentors came up as being critically important, not only to have mentors, but also to be a mentor. However, women felt that the whole mentorship model has dramatically changed. So let me give you another example from 30 Rock and how mentorship was done in the past in a hierarchical firm, and then we'll flip forward to see how mentorship is done today. So I asked women, well, what is mentorship like today? And both the entrepreneurs and the corporate women said, life is too complex. Business is too complex. It's now you need a personal board of advisors. You need someone to help you within your organization, outside of your organization, someone above you, people below you, people to your right and your left, finance, education, health, multiple advisors. This is what mentorship is about today. It's not that easy anymore just to have one person and follow them through because, as you know, if you're living longer and moving firms, you may not have that person to tag on to. Mentorships. Last point about encore careers is a very important point, particularly a lot of women brought it up because of this concept of living longer and really thinking about What if they weren't married, or what if they were alone, or what if they had kids and grandkids to think about? So I asked women, one woman who's 54, she left corporate world, she was a vice president of marketing, and I said, why did you leave, and what are you doing now? She said, I decided to leave. I wanted out at 50 because I was burnt out. 24/7, corporate life, always on call, flying all over the world. I was burnt out. She said, I'm a great marketing person. I had to figure out how to ratchet down for my encore career. She said, I went out and looked at women and men and saw, she said, the world divided into two spaces. One was the people with the skills. They know how to program webs. They know how to fix cars. They know how to bake cakes. They can package themselves, sell the skill, and make money in their next life. She goes, you know what? That's not me. She said, here I am, a corporate person. All I know is marketing. I know a lot about marketing in different kinds of firms and different functional areas. So she said, I fall into the bucket of the skilled consultant. So she said, I made a plan to figure out what would I be in my encore career. Today, she has a small firm where she is marketing consultant for small high-tech firms who don't have marketing departments. The second woman I interviewed was 67, and I asked her about her encore career. I thought she was in it. She goes, no, my encore career starts at 70. My encore career is 70 to 90. She said, after all, I will be living to 100, and I don't have enough money. So I'm going to have to work till I'm 90. I'm a single mom, paid for my daughter's college education, advanced degrees, and she's getting married. She says, I got a long life of debt ahead of me. And she's working now. So she said, I look at things differently. The world is divided into two buckets. One is what's in my proximity, because let's face it, I'm not moving. So who's hiring locally? And second, what's age appropriate? Who's going to hire a 70-year-old? She said, here I am living in these two industries, healthcare and technology. She said, I looked at technology and said, are they going to hire me at age 70? Probably not. She said, I looked at healthcare. Are they going to hire me at age 70? Well, with the baby boomers retiring, large numbers, she said, who better to take care of a geezer but a geezer? So she's taking her gerontology certification. Bottom line, what all women said is don't get stuck without options. So, career planning. This is my next phase of research, which I'm not going to go into any depth today, but I just want you to look over on the right. An hour and a half. That's the average time that people spend in a year on career planning. I want you to look over at the bar on the left, near me. That's how much time people spend sleeping in a year, over 2,700 hours. Why am I comparing those two data points? Because you're going to spend about a third of your life sleeping and a third of your life working. And if you're going to live to 100, you might want to think about spending some time around career planning. And to make it really more interesting, when I graduated from college, there was about 25,000 jobs available. Today, there's about 35,000 different occupations. And you know that's growing because technology and biomedical and all of these services just keep creating new opportunities and jobs exponentially. Lots to think about. You have to think about yourself as a product or service. You Inc. What am I going to do about my financial plan, my education plan, my career plan, my work plan, my retirement plan? So my suggestion is, instead of looking at the one long ladder, is look at your life in decades and start to think about, what am I going to do in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, yes, 80s, and the young ones in the back in your 90s, and look at it as a cross-section of health, education, finance, technology, career, and social. Mom power. People always ask the question, did any surprising result come out of this study? I've been studying women for over 15, 20 years. I always ask the same question. What did your mother have any influence in your career or your life? And years ago, women would say, no, it was my father. My father or my brother was the most influential person in my career or life. Now in 2012, I asked the same question, and people mentioned mom 702 times. In 200 interviews, that's about 3 to 4 times. If you're a mom or have a mom, it's very important. The role models that mothers and wives and working women have become for their sons and daughters is really powerful. So let me just